I need a structure. I need some sort of guidance to be sure that I am writing a book that is making sense. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Just another struggling writer. The Beleaguered Author's one-stop shop for commiseration and hopefully inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. Well, today we are going to be talking about story structure, specifically the specific kind of story structure I have decided to utilize to write my current work in progress, Seekers of Empyrean, which is of course my modern world urban fantasy about a young woman with a rare magical ability who is recruited by a secret government agency to hunt down a dangerous fugitive in exchange for help solving her mother's mysterious disappearance. And that is the 6-act story structure. Now, before we get into it, a quick caveat, I am by no means an expert on the 6-act story structure. In fact, I didn't even know what it was until I was trying to find a story structure for Seekers of Empyrean. And I was really kind of not loving the most common forms of story structure, the 3-act structure and the Save the Cat Writes a Novel kind of beat structure. And that led me to discovering the 6-act structure, which, as I continued to read about it, really fit in better with how I was structuring my novel. But while Seekers is my first book written with a 6-act story structure, I have read up quite a bit on it. And while I don't think I'm quite an expert per se, I do feel qualified enough to kind of walk you through the basic framework of the structure if you are someone who is looking for some alternatives to Save the Cat and the 3-act structure. But it's also important to note that not all stories are going to fit neatly into any kind of story structure. So if the 6-act structure doesn't work for you either, don't feel pressured to try and make your story conform to it. Just write the book you want to write. And oftentimes I find that you can actually apply these structures retroactively as sort of a media analysis exercise. It's not really something that you need before you get started. But if you are someone who is struggling to really plot your novel, and you're like me who needs to do a really, really thorough detailed outline and likes having a framework, but the most common ones aren't working for you, then maybe the 6-act structure will be the answer to your needs. For those of you who like to keep up with my nail polish, today we were doing this like nice bright orangey. There we go. Just had to get my face out of the way. And it is called Glitter, and L-I-T is in all caps. Glitter. So like I said, I discovered the 6-act structure as I was in the outlining phase for Seekers of Empyrean. And I was really struggling with the fact that my outline wasn't really fitting in with the common story structures. I was finding that the 3-act structure was too broad for me, and the Save the Cat beat sheet to be way too narrow and specific. So I went on a little bit of a journey to see what other kinds of story structures were out there that might help me get my head around my outline, because at the time I was really, really struggling with having enough plot and when the plot beats need to be introduced and all of that to kind of help things feel like they're in a good flow. And so through my Googling, I stumbled on this 6-act structure, and it just happened to really click with my specific writing style and the plot that I had already come up with. But whether or not I end up using the 6-act structure for future books, I'm really not sure. I don't know if it's just it happened to work for this one book or if it's my writing style that fits it. I'm not sure, but it was truly instrumental in breaking me out of like a little bit of a slump back then, because I was really struggling to make sure that my outline was telling a cohesive narrative. Another thing that's important to note with this structure is that it doesn't really follow the same old beats that you're familiar with, but I still do use certain beats and I still apply them to the 6-act structure. You're not going to find it in any breakdowns of the 6-act structure, but again, I still use them because I still find certain ones useful. And those are going to be like the inciting incident, the midpoint, the second half pinch point, the climax denouement. Those are things I still do find useful when I'm thinking about major moments in the story, and specifically where they're supposed to fall in the larger narrative. Enough high-level stuff. Let's get into the nitty-gritty, how the 6-act structure breaks down. So the first thing you need to know about the 6-act structure is obviously there are 6 acts, but they don't break down evenly as you might expect. For the most part, they do, but as you get closer to the end, things start to get a little bit wonky. And again, if your particular story doesn't quite fit into this structure, I have been tweaking it myself to make it more fit my writing style. So it is adaptable in that way, at least from my perspective. So Act 1 is called The Imperfect Situation, and that is your opening snapshot. That is you showing your reader what your main character's life is like before everything hits the fan, before the inciting incident kicks off a new phase of their life. And that imperfect situation could be they're unhappy at work, or they are going through a divorce, or if you're like me and write fantasy, it could be that, you know, the local wizard is a tyrant and, you know, oppressing the villagers, whatever the opening snapshot is. We know that it is not an ideal situation for your main character, because otherwise, what would the story be about? Now, in the traditional 6-act structure, Act 1, The Imperfect Situation, is meant to take up the first 20% of your novel. But this is one area where I have tweaked the structure a little bit to fit my writing style. For me, I like to drop the inciting incident very, very, very early on, like no later than chapter 2. And then I have a couple of chapters afterwards, which in the traditional beat structure is where the debate takes place of the main character still in this imperfect situation, but not sure they want to commit to the new thing just yet. So while in the traditional structure, this is going to take up the first 20%, for me, it's closer to like 15%. In Seekers, I think it was like 16 or 17 total, because I like to drop my inciting incidents so early and I don't like to linger in the opening snapshot beats. I think of the Act 1 as to be a little bit on the shorter side, and I save that room and use it later in specifically Act 2. Act 2 is called Learning the Rules of the New World, essentially. So your character has accepted the call, they have gone through this inciting incident, and they are in a new situation. In my book, Seekers of Hyperion, this is where Arceli actually joins the secret government agency. And this whole act is about her figuring out her place in this new world and what the dynamic is and what the rules are, what is to be expected of her, what the external goals for her role in the secret government agency and whatnot, things of that nature. So there's also like a literal training montage. So this is essentially where your main character is figuring out this new situation that they've been thrust into, whether they accepted this new situation or not, or if it was thrust upon them. Either way, there's going to be new things to figure out and new rules to test the boundaries of and whatnot. So that's what Act 2 is all about. This is where you're going to do the most of your lore and info dumping, I feel like, because it's not just the main character who is learning the new rules, it's also your reader. Again, going back to Seekers, this is where we like explain the details of the magic system, learn the hierarchy of the secret government agency, things of that nature. So your book has any sort of explanations that need to occur for the main character to understand their situation. It's usually going to be in this act. Again, in the traditional 6-act structure, this will take another 20% from the 20% mark to the 40% mark. For me, I ate up the extra room that I left out of Act 1 and absorbed it into Act 2 just because I felt there was just too much to explain to the main character to really keep it to a narrow 20%. So mine ended up at about 23%. I think you could even go all the way up to 25% if you have that much to explain. I feel like that's going to be especially true in like speculative fiction, sci-fi, and fantasy. Again, there's a little bit of wiggle room there. Now on to Act 3, which is called Stumbling into the Central Conflict. I'll be honest with you guys, I don't love the word stumbling because, I don't know, it takes away the agency of your main character being intentional and actually like doing the work. But in a sense, it is kind of accurate because at this point in the story, your character might be aware of what the conflict is, but it's usually not a totally clear picture, or it might even be completely false. And through exploring that unclear or outright false goal, they find themselves in the middle of what the real conflict is. Now, Act 3 is going to encompass the midpoint. It goes from traditionally 40% to 60%, with the midpoint right in the middle. And of course, the midpoint is a very, very key moment of your book. That's going to be where the stakes are really elevated and where your protagonist typically shifts from being reactive to the situation they're in to being proactive in pursuing a goal. Now, Act 4 is my favorite act when I am reading books, and that is the doomed plan. This act typically kicks off around the 60% mark and goes up to the 80% mark. And to me, that is the most exciting part of any book. That is when it feels like the plot is really starting to roll fast downhill, like a snowball that is just gathering speed and momentum and mass, and it feels like it's on a collision course for the main character. It is in Act 4 where I feel like I cannot put the book down because I have to see what happens. So if you're asking me, this is the most important one to nail. And this is going to include your second half pinch point, and it's going to set off the dark night of the soul, which we'll get into in a minute. Like all of the other acts that came before it, Act 4 is again 20% of your book, but I do like it to be a little bit long, mirroring Act 2, between 23 and 25%. Again, I just feel like this is the most exciting part, and if you're doing it right, every single scene should build off each other up until this massive like freight train that you can't stop. And while that might mean for some writers that you are writing very quickly and things are so fast paced and so you're not really lingering in those moments, I just feel like there's a lot going to be happening in this act. So usually around 80, I would say between 80 and 85% is where Act 4 is finished. Now we are getting into these last two acts, which are the shortest of the 6. And Act 5 is called Trying a Long Shot. And this is going to encompass your Dark Night of the Soul, if you didn't include it in Act 4, and the climax. Personally, I think I like to think of the Dark Night of the Soul as being in Act 5, but again, your mileage may vary. So because this encompasses the climax, this is going to include your big confrontation, fight scene, final gambit, whatever your main character needs to do to achieve the actual goal. The stakes and the danger are at their highest peak, and your protagonist should face the possibility that they might fail before pushing through to secure victory. That's why it's the long shot. If your Act 4 ran long, this act will be a little bit shorter, but in the traditional structure, it should be about 15% from 80 to 95%, which leads us into Act 6, which is the new situation. This is your main character experiencing a new world after the climax. Whatever result came from the climax, it produced a new situation that your character now must navigate. Whether or not you're writing a standalone or a series, this is the moment where you show how your character is coping with whatever happened in your climax. Happy ending, sad ending, cliffhanger. This is how you kind of wrap everything all in a bow. And if you are writing a series, dropping the hook for your sequel, or writing an epilogue like I'm doing. And of course, since this is the last act, it will take up the last 5% of your story. That's pretty much the breakdown. Again, I'm a little bit softer on the percentages than a lot of literature on the 6-act structure would like you to be, but I think that's also a really great thing about the 6-act structure is it's a little bit more loosey-goosey than the Save the Cat beat sheet, while still providing a more solid framework than the 3-act structure does. And as with all storytelling, there's no rule that says you need to adhere to this specific breakdown. If you like the way that it works but don't think it needs 6 acts, you can throw one out. I know Meredith uses a 4-act structure and that works really great for her. Again, there really are no rules when it comes to writing a book. So long as you're getting words on the page, you're doing it right. I am someone who needs framework. I need a structure. I need some sort of guidance to be sure that I am writing a book that is making sense and that is telling a cohesive story. And that is how I ended up finding the 6-act structure in the first place. So if you're like me and are someone who needs that framework, I think the 6-act structure is a great alternative to the opposite sides of the spectrum that I feel the 3-act structure and the Save the Cat beat sheets represent. And that is everything from me. Please let me know in the comments if you use a specific story structure in your writing, or if you just kind of freewheel it and then apply the structure afterwards, or if you ignore structure altogether. I firmly believe that all of those approaches are valid so long as you're getting words on the page. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I so appreciate it. If you like my content and want to support the channel, please like and subscribe, or consider leaving a comment down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me like the roller coaster emoji to represent the traditional like rising action of the 3-act structure. In my next video, I will have a writing vlog for you, a new kind of writing vlog in which I am on serious crunch time. So I hope you look forward to it, and I will see you then. Bye.